If I see the Kibra of today, it is being called the largest slum in Africa. Poor sanitation, overcrowding, yeah? High crime rate, a lot of other bad things happening. The type of houses, congestion, you know, it is really sad. What makes it even more sad for me is this, that 60 years after independence, 60 years after independence, that a section of Kenyans still live this way. What is the meaning of Uhuru? I asked myself. How can we continue living like this? Do we have leaders? Do we have a government that cares? Compare ourselves with other countries. Compare Kenya with Singapore. In 1963, Kenya was ahead of Singapore. But in 35 years, Singapore moved from a third world country into the first world. We, the Nubians, have been living in Kibra for close to 200 years. We are classified as a minority and marginalized community in Kenya. We are the forgotten people. There can be no development, no prosperity without the people's welfare being looked into. So it is a sad story. I'm sure our ancestors, wherever they are, they must be really weeping. My name's Ibrahim Yunis Ali. I was born in Kibra, Makina, 64 years ago. And I went to school at Kibera Primary School in 1967. That's when I started Standard 1 in Kibera Primary School. Prior to that, around the roundabout at Makina, there's a hall there which used to be our nursery school. And our teacher at that time was Mazanaitia, who is still alive. This was in 1964, 65, 66. Prior to the building of Kibera Primary School, which, as you're all aware, was built by the British for the Nubian ex-soldiers in the year 1949 and was operationalized in 1953, there was no other school in Kibra. All Nubians had to go through that school I told you at Makina. And then Kibera Primary School was, people were going up to Standard 3. And if you wanted to pursue further studies, they were going to Pumwani. So from Kibera Primary School, I went to Lenana High School, Form 1 to Form 6. I finished my Form 6, and you know those days we only had one university, which was Nairobi University, and then there was Kenyatta University, which was a constituent college of Nairobi University. I did not go to university, but I immediately started work. I started work in the civil service in 1982. I worked within the rank and file of the civil service. I pursued my education privately. I did CPA and CPS through CASNEB, and thereafter I acquired my degree through correspondence with a South African university. I obtained a Bachelor of Education through correspondence, and then I did an executive MBA. And that enabled me to rise through the ranks in the civil service. I started in the Treasury as a clerical officer and was attached to the Income Tax Department. Then I became a trainee. Then I worked in the civil service in various capacities for 36 years until I retired in March 2018. From a clerical officer, by the time I was leaving the civil service, I was the Director of Human Resource and Administration in the NEPAD Kenya Secretariat, which is a semi-autonomous agency under the National Treasury that was focused mainly on African Union matters, policies and programs on how they can be cascaded into Kenya. So after I left the civil service in March, I came home. I started my own consultancy. By training, I am also a certified public secretary. As I told you, I did CPS, and then I did a governance audit course, which was organized by the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries of Kenya, of which I'm still a member up to date. So since I retired from the public service, I've been in private practice, practicing company secretarial and governance audit. But my main area is training. I train on corporate governance, I train on leadership and management to clients, circles, and organizations. That's what I do for a living now. During the 60s, growing up in Kibra was a rural area. Kibra was forested. I'm among the generation who are lucky to have seen the forested Kibra. The new generation now were not so lucky. All the Nubian villages, all the Nubian 14 villages were still intact. Sarangombe was intact, Lomle was intact, Langata was intact, Galalima was intact. All these places were forested. At that time, it was actually farmland. Kibra was farmland. People were doing farming, and some were grazing cattle, cows, goats. This was the main preoccupation. A few people were engaged in commercial activities. They had opened some shops, but nearly all the Nubians were farmers or rearing cattle. I used to stay with two of my grandmothers. One was in Lomle, called Abawanjiko, the late. And there's another grandmother of mine who was at Makina, called Atamino, who are all now late. So I used to shuttle between Lomle and Makina. Now, when I was staying in Lomle, which is now Ayani Estate, all this area you see for Jesus, there was nothing. That area was forested. When we used to come to Kibira Primary School, because the number of students were more than the number of classes, so we used to attend school into shifts. Unfortunately for me and others, we were in that shift that starts at 11 and ends at 4. And there was the other shift that starts from morning 8 and goes up to lunchtime. I could not walk alone from Lomle to Kibira Primary School because it was a forest. So we used to meet together, about 4 or 5 people. I remember my colleagues like Ahmed Ali, you know him, Ahmed and others. They used to come from Sarangombe. They would pass through Lomle and we would go to school together and come back. It was a forest. We used to get food from the shambas, you see, and then people were rearing chicken. The environment was quite different. It was a rural area. Yeah, it was a rural area, and the Nubians were dominant. You see, up to the 60s, other communities had not come into Kibra so much. So we Nubians were still dominant. People had large farms. Even Karanja Road, you see this Salama now, this was somebody's farm. This estate started in the early 60s. It was conceived in 1959, and then early 60s is when they built Karanja. But it was farmland, complete farmland. So we grew up in very humble beginnings. I'm sure you know that my parents, my father was a politician from 1957 until he became a councillor, and then he became an MP. But it did not reflect so much. We used to walk barefoot to school. We only started wearing shoes because of, even when we were going to Kibira Primary School in 1967, initially we were not wearing shoes. Most Nubians, we used to stay in mud thatched houses. I can tell you the number of houses that had electricity in Makina, where I used to stay. Mzebro, you know where Mzebro's house is? Mzebro is one of the first people to have electricity and a TV. I remember we used to go and watch World Cup in their sitting room. And then you come around on the way to Kambimuru, there was called Mzedaki. He also had electricity there. The people with electricity around Makina were not more than 5 those days. So Nubians were living a very humble life. And because now, you know, as people, rural urban migration and then government policies, people started moving in, the lifestyle of the Nubians started changing pole pole, until we now find ourselves, until the place now became an informal settlement. But prior to that, it was this, like the people now during these festivities, watu wanaenda nyumbani, they go home. It was beautiful. Imagine we would walk all the way from Makina to Sarangombe. During Eid period, we would visit all those 14 villages from morning. We would knock door to door. It's not like now you visit relatives. All Nubians used to know each other, all Nubian families. And during Eid, we visit all Nubian families, door to door. So that's how our life was. There was a mosque. In fact, there were only 3 mosques as I was growing up. The Makina Mosque, there was a mosque in Lomle, and the mosque in Lindi. We would come from Maulidi to Lindi and Makina. So it was a communal lifestyle. It was beautiful, forest, birds, wild animals. It was really nice. If I see the Kibra of today, it is being called the largest slum in Africa. Poor sanitation, overcrowding, yeah, high crime rate, a lot of other bad things happening. The type of houses, congestion, you know, it is really sad. What makes it even more sad for me is this, that 60 years after independence, 60 years after independence, that a section of Kenyans still live this way. What is the meaning of Uhuru? I asked myself. How can we continue living like this? Do we have leaders? Do we have a government that cares? Compare ourselves with other countries. Compare Kenya with Singapore. In 1963, Kenya was ahead of Singapore. But in 35 years, Singapore moved from a third world country into the first world. We, the Nubians, have been living in Kibra for close to 200 years. We are classified as a minority and marginalized community in Kenya. We are the forgotten people. There can be no development, no prosperity without the people's welfare being looked into. So it is a sad story. I'm sure our ancestors, wherever they are, they must be really weeping. If we go back to history, you know how we came here, and that's the subject of the book which we are going to discuss. After the First World War, our forefathers wanted to go back, but they were prevailed upon by the British to remain behind. And they were given a lot of false promises. One of the promises they were given was that their welfare will be looked into, their land rights, development rights, citizenship rights, and all those other human rights, which did not happen. Now, successive post-independent governments have never addressed our situation as the Nubian community. Kibra historically is Nubian land. Look at what is happening in Kibra. Developments are taking place within the outskirts of Kibra. Recently, you are all aware at Woodley. Woodley is part of the Nubian land that was taken away during the colonial period. You saw houses have been demolished. Simeona, the county government, they are intending to put up developments. You go Soweto, you saw there are developments taking place. If you Kibra, developments are taking place around Kibra. We are being surrounded by developments. We are the odd one out. The Soweto housing scheme, Nubians are not part of it. Yet that development is being done on Nubian land. You are aware, there is not a single Nubian who is part of the Soweto scheme and even the earlier ones that have been done. Yet, all these developments are being done on the original Nubian land. Let me take you even closer home. The Kenya Railway Corporation, they have built some houses along the railway line. Sindio? I know the matter is in court, but we can say the reason why the matter is in court because the Nubians were excluded. Nubians are the owners of Kibra. How can you do any development without involving them? How? The Constitution of Kenya talks of inclusivity, sindio? Participation. How can you cannot exclude the Nubian community, more so from their own land? How can we be excluded? This is why we talk about the marginalization and exclusion of the Nubian community. The whole plight of the Nubian community and other vulnerable groups is tied down to the system of government we've had. We do not yet have a democratic country that respects the rule of law, that involves all citizens. What is killed this country is tribalism and nepotism. Here, do not be cheated that there is any democracy. When it comes to an election, it is a roll call of tribes. It is a roll call. So, consider a community like the Nubi. If we have a system of politics where mobilization is done on tribal ethnic basis, the Nubis don't stand a chance. Yes, we have our own internal issues as a community, but they are external issues. Let me give you an example. In the elections of 2022, in the nominations to county assembly and in parliament, there's something called a special interest seats. One of the categories of the special interest seats is for minority and marginalized. The only minority and marginalized community in Nairobi is the Nubi. Yet, the nominee for the marginalized and minority, is he a Nubian? He's not. He's not a Nubi. Because politics is on ethnic basis. It's all pure tribalism. This culture of tribalism is what is even bringing a problem now. When you see these politicians making noise, everybody is championing for their tribe. They are not championing for rule of law, democracy, human rights, progress. Do not be cheated. Everybody is fighting for their community. This is one of the effects of multi-partyism we had. Upon multi-partyism coming into Kenya in 1992, we started having tribal parties. These parties have got owners. Do not deceive yourself that if you're a member of this party, that there's anything for you. It is the owner of the party who will decide who gets what. We tried through the constitution to fund political parties so that democracy and good governance can take root. But right now, you know it. If the party leader decides this is the way, it will be. Sindio? The Nubians do not feature in that equation. We were better off politically and in other ways prior to multipartyism, because politics used to revolve on personalities, your personality. But now, politics revolves around the party, the ethnic group, the region, and so on and so forth. Langata was much bigger. It combined the whole of Kibra and Langata, and it extended all the way to parts of Starehe in town, up to industrial area, South B, and so on, Mombasa Road. The political terrain at that time is different from now. It was a single party. People were competing as individuals, not based on tribe. And my father had a unique track record. He started off as a trade unionist in Nairobi. He was in Athi River here, then he became in Nairobi. He was an assistant organizing secretary of the Kenya Commercial and Allied Workers Union. So already he was in the labor movement. So he was able to mobilize support from across the board, from the Nubi community and non-Nubian community. So his track record was peculiar. You're asking me, what can we do about the Nubian situation as it is? My view is this. The Nubi community, one thing that is letting them down right now, why they are not moving ahead, is the question of leadership. The issue of leadership, even I've mentioned in my book, leadership is a necessary ingredient for the Nubi to move ahead. But now, we have got a lot of leadership challenges within the Nubian community. And the Nubi community right now is in transition. Let me give you the statistics. In the year 2009, the Kenya Nubian Council of Elders did a census of Nubians. And I want just to give you the figures. This was 15 years ago. The figures have changed. When I looked at the statistics, 52% of Nubians are women. 52%. At that time, the youth were 80%. Youth were, and the median age of a Nubian is 19 years, which means half of the Nubians are 19 years and below. Sindio? We are living in a modern world. Sindio? In a modern world, we need a new crop of leaders. Yeah? We need a new crop of who can propel us to the next level. But if you maintain the same people in a changing world, we will move nowhere. Unaelewa? Me, I am advocating. I have even said in the book, I am advocating for a new crop of Nubian leadership across the board. Let me give you one example. We as Nubians, we have sidelined women into leadership. Tell me which Nubian organization that we have women on top or their voices being heard. Is there any? Do you know? Do you know any? How can you exclude 52% of your population from decision making and expect to move forward? Research has shown that women are very good leaders. Research. Also, in this age, if you look at all the progressive organization countries, most of the leaders are young. If you are maintaining octogenarians as leaders in this age, you will go nowhere. We don't have the right leaders in the community. The professionals, the elite, I interacted with them during my time in the task force. They say they are afraid because if they come and participate within, they are afraid of being insulted. But all other communities are being led by their elite. Sindio? You go to Njurincheke. Eh? Let me give you the example of Njurincheke. You know Njurincheke, sindio? Eh? Mero, Council of Elders. Do you know their driving forces? Meru professionals. Who? Meru professionals. Go to the Luo Council of Elders. Professionals are behind. What about the Kenya Nubian Council of Elders? Leadership. We need a new crop of leadership for this century. Not old school. Old school do not have the tools and the wherewithal to move us. I am 64. One of the things I do now with the Nubian youth is to mentor them. In every forum, I tell them this is your time. Leadership is never given. Leadership is taken. I told you, 80% of the population, it is their time to step forward. My father was a councillor when he was 26 years old. He became an MP when he was 33. He's not that a youth. Yeah. When he retired from politics, he became still a community leader. He was the co-founder of the Kenya Nubian Council of Elders. During his tenure, maybe you guys were very young, he organized a protest. He was now in his late 60s. He organized the first Nubian protest. They filed, him and other elders filed a case in the High Court. What are the Nubian youth doing? They are waiting to be told. Leadership is not about title, it's not about position. Leadership is an attitude. I am the 4th generation. You guys maybe are the 6th and 7th. It is your time. We can only advise. We cannot be in the steering wheel. It is you. I hope I have answered you. In fact, the idea to write the book, strangely enough, came to me last year when I was in the task force. And I happened to have been assigned to be the chair of the working group that deals with public participation. So I attended various forums, over 110 forums, public participation forums. I listened keenly, and to my surprise, even the Nubians don't know their land history. The non-Nubians do not know the history of the Kibra land. And then one day, we had a forum at the Kenya Bankers Institute. And then I was given a session to talk about the Nubian, to give an overview of the Nubian land history. I just gave a brief speech of less than 5 minutes because I did some small research. I just emphasized the period it has taken the Nubian community to get a title to that land. And it was actually 100 years. From 1917 to 2017, it's in 100 years. Yeah? I told the Nubians, you see, it took us 100 years to get what? How long is it going to take us to develop Kibra? Will it take another 100 or 200 years? And that speech resonated so well with the audience. And then some of them told me, "Bwana, you appear to know," after the task force was concluded last year, I sat down, nikaona I've got a lot of free time because last year we were very busy. So I revisited that idea and did research. So this book is basically about the research I have done. So this book I wrote as a result of the inspiration of being in the task force and realizing that many people do not know the history of the Nubian lands. So the book basically addresses 5 fundamental issues. In chapter 1, it addresses who is a Nubi. Yeah? In order to talk about Nubian land, you must understand who is a Nubi, isn't it? There's a lot of misconception about who is a Nubi. If you Google today, Nubi or Nubian, you will get there are 3 sets of Nubians. You will find there are Nubians from Nuba Mountains. And if you look at the YouTube, those people, they don't look like us. Sidio? Even language, the dressing, culture, it's not like us. Even the women don't look like you. Sidio? And then, if you go further, you'll find that there are Nubians from a kingdom known as Nubia, black. And we are told that their leader was a lady. Sidio? You look at them, they are black, but now they're in Egypt. So, and when we look at ourselves, those ones is a kingdom that has existed for thousands of years, but we are not part of them. Identifying who a Nubi is. We, the Nubians, our history is rooted in the Anglo-Egyptian period. After the Berlin Conference. After the Berlin Conference of 1884, the European imperial powers partitioned Africa into their sphere of influence so that they can exploit its resources. Once they divided Africa into their spheres of influence, they needed manpower to assist them take control of this land and exploit them. So, you know these explorers, you know Captain Lugard. You have heard of Captain Lugard, Wakina Speak, Kina Emin Pasha, you know. These people gave information that there are groups of blacks from Sudan who are well built. Nasikia, group of blacks who are well built, disciplined, and these people don't fall sick. Nasikia, these are the people who gave information. Emin Pasha was the governor of Equatorial region in the Sudan. Captain Lugard was the military advisor, military administrator of Uganda. You know, at that time, there was no country known as Kenya. So amesema kuna communities. These communities happen to be those ethnic groups of the Sudan. Bari, Lendu, Dinka, Shuluk, Kuku, Nyangwara, and these other Muru, Zande. So what did they do? They recruited these people into the Anglo-Egyptian army and took them. They became part of the Anglo-Egyptian army. They were trained there. Now, once in the army, they also became converted into Islam. These were people from different tribes. Conversion into Islam. Now they have cut off their links with their cultural and with their people. So, and they were speaking at that time Arabic. Arabic was the language that was being spoken in that region, in Sudan and Egypt. So these people now became a unified community. That unified community came to be known as the Nubi. The word Nubi is derived from the word Junub. When an Arab those days talks of Junub, Junub refers to south. Do you hear them telling the blacks, Amshina, rolekum fi Junubna? What is that guy saying? Eh? Eh? Go to south. Nubi. The word Nubi refers to a person from the south. Do you understand? This collection of tribes later on became together because now they are in the army, they have become Muslims, they are cut off from the other people. So they formed a tribe known as Nubi. This tribe now has got a blend of the ethnic, of various ethnic communities. It has Islam, it has Arabic because of language and other things. And some of the military commanders in the Egyptian army were Turkish. Do you see how the Turkish influence comes? The way the Nubians greet each other is the way the Turks greet each other. The way you are greeting me here, that is the Turkish. Have you watched a Turkish movie? From today, just go and Google. That is the Turkish influence. Even that hat, the Torbush, these are from Turkish. So it is a blended thing, and it has become a community. It's now a tribe. The only time when we were growing up in Kibra, whenever there's a wedding, you will hear the elders saying, oh, Nazuso Sibir Bari, Nazuso Sibir Dinga. Even now it comes up, isn't it?
Even the villages.
Yes. Even the villages were named according to the tribes. Kambialuru, Kambilendu, Kambimuru. Yeah. And that's how it was. So first you have to understand who a Nubi is. We're a unique ethnic community that was formed by historical factors. We were formed by historical factors. If you go back to Sudan now, this tribe does not exist there. You go there, supposing like me, we are Shuluk. If I go back now and I go to the Shuluk, they are Christians. They are not Muslims. If I go and say that I'm a Shuluk who came to Kenya 200 years ago, where is my father, by the way, that's what he did. In the year 2005, my father went to Sudan to look for our people. He found them. When he came back here, he came and told us, now you see, I'm going back home. He prepared himself. He took some of my brothers and sisters. They went back. He said he was given a shamba there to build. So, fortunately for him, the relatives found there were Muslims at a place called somewhere in Equatorial. I'll soon give you the name of the place. So my father went there. Unfortunately, he also passed on there at a place called Malakal. You know a town called Malakal? Malakal is a place for the Shuluk. It is bordering the north and south. Bari. Go and look for the Bari there. They are not Nubis. He's a Bari with their own tradition. Look at what the Nubis are doing. You won't find it anywhere else. So first of all is to demystify who is a Nubi and how did they come to Kenya. They were brought by the British, and you know the British were very clever people. They were not doing it directly. The British outsourced colonialism to a private company. There was a company known British East Africa Company. You have read about it in history. That was a private company, Iberia. Yeah, that was a private that was doing the donkey work on behalf of the British government. Even now, one of the challenges, if you want to sue the British government, one of the challenges, it was a private company that was doing it. They only came into the scene at the end of it, when the Nubians now are absorbed into the King's African Rifles. But the people who recruited the Nubians and brought them to Kenya were the Imperial British East Africa Company, through the names of those personalities I told you, Wakina Lugan, Wakina Emin Pasha, and so on. So Sasa, when they came here, they were to provide security. So they were deployed in various places in Kenya. That's why you find some Nubians in Kisumu, you find some in Kisii, you find some in Dama Ravine, some in Meru. Yeah, this was on account of deployment. In fact, the first Nubian settlement in Kenya was in Eldama Ravine. The Nubians of Mumias, they have a slightly different history. Because, you know, the part of Nyanza and Western was part of Uganda. When the Kabaka was facing problems, it is the Nubian Askaris from Uganda that came to assist him. Yeah? Mumia, yeah. So, yeah, Mumia, yes. Yes. When Nabongo Mumia faced some challenges in his kingdom because there were some enemies that wanted to topple him, he called from reinforcements from Uganda. So the Nubian soldiers who came from Uganda in 1884 are the ones who came to help Mumia in Kakamega there, that kingdom. And that's how we have a Nubian settlement. Because after the Nubians came, they helped the Nabongo, Mumias. He gave them land. That's how they got the land there. Unaona? So now, we must understand who the Nubians are, in brief. Then how did they get the land from Kibra? That's number two, I'm addressing. Acquisition of land in Kibra. The book outlines how the Nubians got the land in Kibra. It was part of their compensation for military service during the colonial period. Then number three, I'm addressing how did the Nubians got dispossessed of that land? And the approach I've taken is to look at it in terms of villages. We had 14 villages. When the Nubians were given the land, a legal process was used. They were not just given. The land was surveyed, the land was gazetted to give it legal status, and they were issued with an allotment letter known as the Shamba Pass. So they established Nubian settlements in form of villages. Then in chapter 2, I'm looking at how did they lose the land?